After literally a little less than a year, this becomes profitable. You are just printing money after that.
Once you put something up there, you just got this long tail of dividends from Bitcoin mining for decades, perhaps perpetually. It just makes sense for all Bitcoin mining to be done in space.
If we got just one customer, Elon Musk, on board with even half of his planned satellites, he would make $60 billion off of the idea.
I just wonder whether earthbound Bitcoin mining can even compete economically.
You can scale this way, way bigger than you can on Earth.
Everyone should be doing this, right?
Archie.
Okay, the boys from Intercosmic Energy, space miners, Nick, Mike, Brad, welcome. It's a pleasure to host you guys. How you doing?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure for me to have you guys here. As soon as I heard, I mean, we've been trying to organize this for some time, Nick, but we just had a huge schedule trying to get this stuff up and running, and I really wanted you to. I really wanted the opportunity to get you in the studio, but it just wasn't to be. But hopefully, sometime down the track, we'll be able to manage that. Space mining Bitcoin. That just sounds like such an improbable pursuit. How does one get into? How do you get that into your head as an idea that's even feasible? So how does that happen?
Yeah, I guess for me, it was a couple days after the election last year, and what really spurred it was the fact that we got a favorable administration that really likes Bitcoin and crypto, and also really sees the value in what Elon's doing with SpaceX and just the whole aerospace industry. And it was really funny. Around that time, Elon Musk had a post on X, talking about the Kardashev scale and how we need to harness all the sun's energy for, our use on Earth. And he had an AI generated image that had a satellite in it and the Earth and the sun. And it struck me as an orbital solar farm initially. So with, the last 8 years, I've really dove into Bitcoin and got orange pilled and all the different avenues it takes you down with mining and economics and geopolitics and everything. So it all just kind of hit ahead at once for me when I looked at, something that looked like an orbital solar farm in space. I was like, how can we take that and monetize the sun's endless stranded energy? Because if Bitcoin mining can, monetize stranded sources of energy on Earth, I just thought, why can't we do that in space? So when I started really putting my time, focus, and energy, putting it together, it just made too much sense to me. And I kind of found out that nobody's really looked into this. So once I got on the right track and put two and two together, I figured we could really add in something that can expand the space-based economy and make it economic incentive to monetize stranded solar energy. Basically take orbital energy in space and convert it into value. And that value with Bitcoin, we can send to Earth, the Moon, Mars, and other space stations. So yeah, after I put that together, it just took a little bit of time and outreach and finding the right people to help push the idea further to the point where you and I are talking today. And I have a couple of really intelligent co-founders that are also with us too. So long story short for you.
But what was your background that made you even consider this as a feasible startup venture for you, for someone like you, for example? Tell us a little bit about Nick.
Yeah, so for 10 years, I was a refinery operator, so dealing with the energy industry. And a lot of what my day-to-day looked like was dealing with cryogenic refrigeration processes, heavy electrical, instrumentation. And so for me, it was tying together my technical background of being a refinery operator, but also having a huge interest in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining as well. So when I tied together just my past experience along with my genuine interest in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, it just helped me get across that chasm to the point. And also I've always had a interest in space and aerospace, and just never really applied myself growing up to get myself down that path and direction. So it's really funny that now today I'm a CEO of an aerospace company that's going to be launching the first Bitcoin miners in outer space, and having this team with Brad and also Dr. Myers as well as the base foundational steps to make this a reality. And what really started, me taking this really seriously was sending that idea that I had, that I was just telling you about, out to a lot of influential people on Twitter. And Anthony Pompliano was the first one to get back to me, who really wanted to, pick my brain and understand what I was thinking and how I came to this conclusion of Bitcoin mining in space for the sole purpose of monetizing stranded solar energy. And so once we got on a Zoom call, he wanted to help me out and write a Substack article for me. And with his 260,000 paid subscribers on Substack, once he put out that article, I found out that a lot of his subscribers are actually in the venture capital world. So once I started getting, a lot of DMs from various venture capitalists from all over the world, it really showed me that this can actually be a feasible business and something worth putting all my time, attention, and focus and energy into. So, and that started at the end of last year, and it's still continuing to this day. So that's how this all came to be.
Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform. With Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. Need cash without selling your Bitcoin? With DeBiFi, you borrow against your Bitcoin, non-custodial, multi-sig escrow, and you keep your keys. No banks, no selling. Just institutional grade liquidity with terms up to 2 years and APRs as low as 9%. All transactions are signed using private keys on your own device. Using a 3 of 4 multi-sig setup, 3 out of 4 keys must approve every transaction, giving you control, transparency, and peace of mind. Whether you're a hodler, miner, small business, or treasury team, DeBiFi gives you the cash you need now without giving up your Bitcoin upside or triggering a taxable event. Get liquidity, keep exposure, and stay secure. That's DeBiFi. DeBiFi, your Bitcoin, your money. Now, I know Pomp is a furious ball of relentless energy every single day, going after it. I love his tweets, his energy. I know he cops a lot of flack. I think a lot of it is undeserved. He brings a lot of energy into Bitcoin, and he's also very supportive of a lot of people that I guess the timeline doesn't really get to see until stories like yours pops up. Take us back to why you became interested in Bitcoin, let alone, we'll get into the space stuff in a second, but okay, a lot of the times when I interview someone, it's almost a given that you're just interested in Bitcoin. But why did you get into Bitcoin?
Yeah, so this is going back to mid-2017. So this was while I was early on in my refinery operator career, and it just kind of dawned on me. I'm like, do I want to do this for 30 or 40 years? I'm like, if I don't take some sort of risk financially, like a educated, good risk to put, my money, which is really my hard work denominated in dollars, at least in my country, into something that can, grow exponentially so I can free up my time, focus, and energy. So in 2017, when you had the bull run, that's what initially sucked me in, was the mania of Bitcoin and crypto really taking off, where Bitcoin was finally over $1,000. And I mean, this is going way back, because it's funny, we're at over 100 grand now, but so for me, it was really the mania that got me sucked in. And at about that time, I just bought a house, and the ACH transfers take an ungodly amount of time. And when I was trading, Bitcoin and other cryptos, it was instant transaction settlement with little fees. And it just dawned to me that if time is money and money is time, then this is clearly the future. In one way, shape, or form, I needed to learn more about this. So once I really dove in, and it was with the help of a lot of bright minds on Twitter. The ones I give credit to is Mark Yusko. and Anthony Pompliano were really the two that got me orange pilled. They were hyper focused on Bitcoin and its trajectory and going on TV. And I don't know if you remember, those guys would constantly get roasted when they go on TV just for having the belief of thinking Bitcoin had a bright future. So, I mean, it's kind of funny who's laughing now, but it was just one of those things that I just kept studying, and that study still goes to this very day. I mean, I put in over 12,000 hours of study on this, and I'm just really glad I put my time, focus, and energy into something that was really worth it, not only just with all the different rabbit holes I've gone down, just learning about really how the world works, but also understanding how money works and why Bitcoin is needed and important for fixing money for mankind. And also the fact that it can clean up, the environment by monetizing stranded sources of energy and make it a lot more efficient. That's what piqued my interest as far as like my career goes and how that tied in. But really the money making side of it got me in initially, and riding through the bear markets and just understanding what I'd bought and also what I'd held just made me really pour all my, all the extra money I had into Bitcoin, and I'm still holding to this day. And I can tell you, for anybody that wants to save their purchasing power, the best way, Bitcoin is the way to go. If you can stomach some of the volatility, but I've noticed that that's gone down over time as this asset has grown into a much larger market cap. So if you have a long-term trajectory on, wanting to save your purchasing power and have financial freedom, Bitcoin's really the main way to go. So I guess over time, I really just continued studying Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, and crypto Twitter and Bitcoin Twitter have been massively valuable for me as far as my learning journey goes.
I think the volatility is almost kind of like a cosmic filter around Bitcoin for the patient. It's like the people who are coming into Bitcoin, like most of us get drawn into the number go up, but we then quickly develop an understanding that forges a patience with our holding of our bags. For example, we're like, well, okay, now I really understand what's going on. I'm happy to just hold for as long as I can, and like really I just try to construct my life in a way that enables me to do that for as long as possible. But number go up is a hell of a drug, right?
Yes, it really is. But it's led to more valuable lessons in life. Like, it's shown me that, it's really had me take my health seriously, and I want to live as long as I can, knowing that the financial picture as time goes on is only going to get better, which when I have kids someday, that's going to be massively important for them. They're going to get to do all the fun things they want, like traveling sports. That's going to travel the world, and I won't have to spend all my time, 60 to 80 hours a week like I used to, inside the 5-acre compound of a refinery. Like, I've essentially freed up my time, and it's just helped my mental health a lot too. It's just been a massive blessing, just really learning patience through this, because I'm not a patient person, but this has definitely taught me patience. And I just want to touch on one thing with Bitcoin having that fixed supply. If for anybody who doesn't understand why the value of it goes up more and more over time, like the denominator, I guess if you look at Bitcoin only having 21 million, but there's going to be unlimited fiat money printing till really the end of time, Bitcoin's price is always going to keep the score and correct upwards. So if you can hold as long as you can, you will reap the financial rewards and benefit of it. You just have to take on that lesson of patience.
What was it about Bitcoin that taught you patience in particular?
Oh man. Honestly, it was the fact that it's not a get rich quick scheme. It's, like you said, number go up's a hell of a drug. People really expect to get rich quick on it. And really what it is, it's a don't get poor slowly scheme is what I've learned. I'm sure you've probably seen the same thing too.
No, I've seen that, and it's absolutely true. But I guess I'm class of 2020, right? So like I literally put my money in, and the next week I was up 30%. So right, like I learned quite a lot in. I think I was only maybe like 5 or 6 weeks after Sailor, got in. So we were around about the same time, right? And it just went parabolic. And so the bear market taught me quite a lot. And, I got someone who's quite close to me to invest as well. And I thought they would fold in the bear market, but never raised it, held. And I was really, really proud of them. So it's like bear markets teach you what Bitcoin is all about, I think, because in the bull market, okay, it's much more exciting. It can draw us in. But if you make it through one bear market, I think you've got the metal to hold infinitely, hopefully anyway. That's what it's taught me, and just be a little bit more or a lot more humble, because we're part of something that's so much more profound, so much greater than our own interests. But it's such a wonderful thing that we can take part and take care of our personal interests as well as, being part of this journey with everybody else. But I think there's something really profound going on, and it's really exciting to be a part of that. So, yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. I think it gives everybody that's involved a purpose, and really you look at separating money from state, and just having the freedom to transact. And also, if you're mining, nobody can tell you if you can or can't mine. You plug in a miner and you can start printing money right away. So yeah, it is quite the movement, really. I mean, there's just nothing else I can compare to it. It's a revolution in a lot of ways.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you literally nailed it there, because I started this account without knowing anybody. And I try to encourage everybody out there like this. I literally did not know anybody in Bitcoin. And I just started posting and people started following, and it just sort of developed from there. And I tried to encourage in the bear market for as many people as possible. Like, now is the time for you to, like, if you want to create content, now is the time to do it, so that when the bull market arrives, you've actually got yourself together, you've got your message together, you know what it is that you're offering of value. But the permissionless aspect of it, I particularly like. So when you came into Bitcoin, did you have friends who were already into Bitcoin, or did you just sort of embark on it on your own?
I really embarked on it on my own. I want to touch back on what you said with, you coming in and starting your media company from scratch. I mean, I remember following you and you had like under 5,000 followers, and now you're up to millions. It's quite the testament to you, man. And I want to call you lucky, and in the most respectful way, because luck is when preparation and opportunity intersect, and you really put in the work to become lucky here. And I think that luck will only continue to compound. So, I just want to tell you that for sure.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And look, I am one of those people who ascribes a lot more credit to luck than a lot of people are willing to, once they sort of, have a modicum of success. This is a modest success so far, and I'm trying to make it into something more significant. But yeah, absolutely. If I was 2 years late to doing this, it would have been completely different. I would have missed the momentum. I probably would have lost enthusiasm. Who knows what would have happened? Luck definitely plays a part, and so here we are. I think we enter Bitcoin, each of us, at a time that suits us most, when we need it most. And I think Max says, you get Bitcoin, you'll buy it at the price that you deserve. And I certainly knew about Bitcoin in 2011 and 2013, and I kind of had an idea of, the questions to ask, but I never connected all the dots to understand the potential of Bitcoin. And so I didn't buy in 2011 and 2013 because I wasn't in need of it. But in 2020, I was in need of it, that's for sure. And so I put all my money in, and I was just watching the timeline, and I just thought, I might as well get involved. If I'm going to watch this 24/7, I might as well do something and get involved and hopefully build something of value. But, here we are now. I think I've told the story a few times on the podcast. Here we are now, and, I just want to have some good conversations with people and hopefully give them a platform to raise their profile, their voices, their missions as well. What you guys are doing is incredible. There are a lot of Bitcoin miners out there. Not many of them are mining in space. So why don't you connect the dots with us for us? Because, it's one thing, you've seen the post, there's some ideas out there. I think a lot of people have seen various discussions on Twitter about the Kardashev scale, and space exploration with Elon Musk is quite a prominent feature of the platform as well. And they're all incredible. What made you think that you could do it, for example? Because it's quite a huge undertaking, isn't it? So why were you not overawed by that? And what made you think, hey, that's something that I could actually tackle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, if you really look at, some good examples, I mean, you look at even like Jeff Bezos. I mean, he started out, in New York and moved all the way to Seattle to start an online book company, and look at what it's sprouted into today. I mean, he could have just not had, the guts or the belief in himself to think that he could have made a big change. And I think we all start at a similar foundational ground level. But I think if you have the belief in yourself and you channel all your hard work, time, focus, and energy into something, it will eventually materialize if you keep working at it and have the patience and, obviously make the right steps and reach out to the right people. And you look at today, it's never been easier to connect with people even that are much higher than like my stature. Like I'm just a pretty regular middle-class person in the US. And, for me, initially it was just an idea that I had, but I knew it was a big idea and it could happen. And I've seen how a lot of people on Twitter go from being relatively unknown to being like big players. And I mean, you're an example of it. I look at like Will Clemente. He's an example of it, like Dylan LeClaire, and like Jack Mahlers and all those guys. Like, look at where they're at today. I mean, they really laid, at least in my mind, the groundwork. And also, if you talk about Elon Musk, I mean, he, came from South Africa and was sleeping, in library like stairwells, and now he's the richest guy in the world. It just really goes to show that, if you don't make excuses and you work really hard and have that resilience, you can do something of like massive importance, depending on what you put your time, focus, and energy into. So for me, initially, it just started out as like what I considered a really good idea. But it really wasn't until I talked to Anthony Pompliano and he kind of highlighted for me really how I guess impressive of an idea it was and how much legs it could have if it reached the right minds and the right, people of influence. So once he put out that Substack article and I got, so many messages from venture capitalists that wanted to invest in it, and I started doing the initial investment cost for a pilot satellite, which right now is about $376,000, which I know that Dr. Myers and Brad will also touch on as well. But I was like, we can at least prove the pilot of this. And if you look at over time how space launch costs are going to be coming down because SpaceX and Blue Origin and others are mastering the art of reusable rockets. And as you and I know, Bitcoin is money, store of value that's programmed to go up in value forever over a long time scale. So if you look at just the convergence of this, with space launch costs coming down because that's the biggest cost to put satellites into orbit and these Bitcoin miners into orbit. And with Bitcoin's price on its upward trajectory, so you'll be making more money with mining the certain rewards of Bitcoin, which right now it's like 3.125 Bitcoin per block right now. So if you look at that, I mean, that's today, if you win a solo block, you're looking at, almost $400,000. So if you mine in a pool, you'll make a conservative amount, which this pilot satellite will pay itself off in a number of years. But what I'm really trying to get at is with space launch costs coming down and Bitcoin's price going up, it just made sense to me that this was going to be economically feasible sooner rather than later, like within no more than 10 years at this point. So yeah, it just all made too much sense to me. And I had the right people telling me that this was a good idea, which further gave me the belief that this can happen.
I want to get into, I guess, the economics of mining Bitcoin, but also mining Bitcoin in space in a moment. But I just want to quickly touch on, I guess, the personal aspect of it for you. Do you have a technical pedigree that gave you confidence in leading this venture forward?
Yes. So, I mean, I had an associate's degree in process plant technology, which was a good foundation before I got into my 10-year work career as a refinery operator. So, as a refinery operator, I dealt with heavy electrical and substations and energy transmission and understanding, demand response, which is a big deal with refineries that are very energy intensive because you're running, at least in the refinery I worked in, it was 1,500 horsepower compressors that draw a lot of power. And there's certain times of the year where you have to do demand response, which is actually, really profitable in a way, but the energy company will pay you money to ramp down a little bit, which if you look at like the Bitcoin mining industry, that's something that they really do a great job of is demand response because Bitcoin mining is flexible load capacity. So for me, that tied together, at least that loose end on the energy side for me. So the technical pedigree I have is, with heavy electrical, working with process operations that, it was a cryogenic operation. So, we were taking carbon dioxide and compressing it, drying it, chilling it, and distilling it into like a beverage grade liquid, and also working in air separation where we take the air that we breathe, we compress that and throw it through reverse compressors, which are called expanders. And it actually cools the air down enough to become a liquid. And then you distill, the certain phases of air like oxygen, nitrogen, and argon, and the rare gases like krypton, xenon, and neon. So I worked with a lot of, I guess tying it together like processes, heavy electrical, and cryogenics. So when you look at putting like a Bitcoin miner into space, I have a lot of good foundational education, hands-on experience to understand how this can become possible. But where this really goes to the next level was finding the co-founders, which we have on right now with Dr. Myers and Brad. So, yeah, so I mean, I got enough technical experience and pedigree to get this off the ground enough, and just having that stroke of luck with having my idea reach the right eyes, where then now there's a high probability of funding this. This is looking like this is going to become a reality sooner than later.
That's fantastic. So you get the idea, the Substack goes off, you somehow connect with Pomp. Pomp is generous enough to give you a bit of a shout out with his incredible Substack, which has a very powerful reach as well. And then you get the feedback from a bunch of readers and they reach out to you. Tell us about that. I mean, you don't have to name names, but give us an idea of the caliber of person who was reaching out to you. And I guess which dots did they join for you and made you believe that, hey, this is not just an idea that's kind of feasible on paper, but we can make this a reality?
Yeah, great question. So, the caliber of people, there was VCs that were largely crypto-based that saw the value in this, and they understand the Bitcoin economic side and how this can become feasible, sooner rather than later. But also I had gotten in contact with VCs that had the space-based focus that also saw the value in it. And just having these conversations with all these different VCs that mainly had those two specialties in what they fund, we just had really good constructive conversations. And like, I wasn't afraid to admit what I do and don't know, what my strengths and weaknesses are. And I think just having that transparency and honesty, along with being able to articulate how important it truly is to mine Bitcoin in space, because not only is it the only known way to monetize stranded solar energy in orbit, but also it really sets the foundation for making Bitcoin the universal reserve currency and interplanetary money and payments network. So we're going to have people, living in space stations. We're going to be colonizing on Mars. Like, this Bitcoin mining in space idea really has some legs and really can play a more important part in the future. And I guess with me having the idea and, also taking the steps to get the first Bitcoin mining satellite, patented in the US, which gave us here, the team at Intercosmic Energy, the blueprint, seeing how much bigger this can become for humanity. And really, if we're going to fix money for mankind, Bitcoin is the way to go forward. So we're going to make life interplanetary. Having Bitcoin mining and nodes established in outer space is really the next logical step. So for me, I see a lot of importance in it.
Regarding the economics of Bitcoin mining, so like there's the economics of Bitcoin mining on Earth and the economics of it up in space. Now, how are they different? We know that there's a launch cost, for example, and a huge technical cost of getting something up into space. But is it different once you've got your Bitcoin miners up in the air versus continuously on the ground? So can you make some contrasts and differences, highlight the differences for us there?
Yeah, 100%. So doing it terrestrially, your biggest cost is electricity. And so if you look at the biggest bottlenecks on Earth, so electricity being one, cooling being another, water shortages as well, and also real estate. So if you look at outer space, you have unlimited energy in orbit from the sun. You also have an abundance of cooling with the vacuum of space, and you have a lot more real estate up in space as well. So all three of those things I mentioned are constraints on Earth. So, you could look at the sunniest part of Earth, and that will not even come close to what you will get for instance, in low Earth orbit. So in low Earth orbit, you have 18 hours of sunlight, 6 hours of dark collectively in a 24-hour period. So if you're looking at what Bitcoin mining does best, it converts energy into value. And then that value, which is Bitcoin, you can send wirelessly anywhere. So if you look at doing this in space and you have the abundance of the sun's energy, the abundance of cooling, and also with Starlink giving you low latency internet, to me, it's the most logical place to mine Bitcoin.
Is the intensity of energy available in space greater than what we get on Earth?
Yes, it is, because you don't have atmospheric interference. So that's another massive benefit as well. Like, you can scale this much larger than you could on Earth, and also have more energy, and the efficiency of energy in outer space is considerably more than here on Earth.
And I guess the other thing that my mind pops, okay, so the energy is once you get it up there, the energy is free, right?
Correct.
The cooling is free. You're not paying for the real estate. Are you paying for maintenance, or is the maintenance so much less than what would be required down here?
If you ask me, it can be less. I think with looking at how important it is to get this right the first time from an engineering perspective and a cost perspective, because you can't just go up and fix something real quick like you can on Earth. You have more incentive to really get this done right the first time, where if you're building on Earth, not saying that Bitcoin mining companies do a half-assed job or anything, but you can definitely scale it quicker on Earth, but then you have the maintenance costs that come as a part of it. But if you do this right from a cost perspective and engineering perspective in outer space, these satellites can last decades. Like, if you look at, satellites that have been in like geostationary orbit for decades, like if you look at like Dish TV and Direct TV and certain satellites that, communicate with Earth, I mean, it's proven that you can have satellites up in orbit that last maintenance free for decades.
So I guess, Nick, what I'm thinking about now is like there are more than two parts, I'm sure, but the two parts that are sort of a space Bitcoin mining rig is the energy generation, and then there's the Bitcoin mining part, right? Are they modular? Because I imagine the marginal return of a Bitcoin miner is diminishing over time as newer and newer machines are created on Earth, right? And is there a point at which, I guess, that drops so low, but the energy generation is so valuable that you have a modular setup, you can just replace them? You can send up another satellite and somehow robotically replace the module with new Bitcoin miners? I'm just thinking sort of futuristically. I don't know how ridiculous that sounds.
No, that doesn't sound ridiculous at all. And if you look at like what you're talking about with maintenance, you can have robotics on board with extra parts if needed, and you can have a a command center on Earth, to work this robotic arm to also, replace parts. And I think one of the biggest things that I need to touch on with these satellites, they need to have redundancy and also be able to like auto troubleshoot. So if there is an issue, it can fix itself based on the programming and logic that you put into it. So, another point I will touch on too is if you look at Earth-based Bitcoin mining and how every 4 years we go through a halving, so like a reward reduction. So usually here on Earth with Bitcoin miners, these older miners go offline because they become less profitable because, like you were touching on, you have newer ASICs and better technology that can put out more hash rate with less energy consumption. So if you look at doing this out in space where you have unlimited, unfettered energy, even these older miners can stay profitable well past, the four, even past 1 or even 2 halvings. So you're talking like a lifespan of 8 to 12 years rather than on Earth where it's only about, 4, no more than 8 years. So there's a lot of advantages of doing this out in space versus doing it on Earth.
So economically, let's say up to 12 years, but operationally, how long could they go for?
We've come to the conclusion that these can go anywhere from 5 to 15 years. So that's the benefit of doing this pilot satellite, is that you can do all the testing and models that you want, in theory and on paper, but until you actually get a pilot satellite out there, that's going to be what really proves this as far as finding out the true longevity of these Bitcoin mining satellites.
I'm assuming the reduced requirement for maintenance up in space because you don't have the dust and the like. I guess the cooling aspect is fantastic because you're operating in a vacuum and in a completely different environment. How do they all how do you model all of those in your projections? And I guess, Nick, from a business point of view, how do you confirm those variables without sending something up there and actually mining? Because I'm not sure if you've got a Bitcoin miner live in space yet to test those, but there are a lot of assumptions around those variables. How do you validate them?
I'm going to defer to Brad and Mike on this one because they've been running models through some NASA software that we've secured. So I think they're a good resource to touch on.
So to expand on your question, there's a ton of simulators out there already for space assets. And like Nick was talking about, we ran all of our calculations to the NASA's cost estimate tool. And we used all historical data. So when you're putting something into space, it's just computer parts, or if it's biological, it's biological, and it's been put into space multiple times. So the estimates and how long things will last are very accurate. They actually tend to be conservative, so that if something does break, it's more of a conservative long lifespan. So if something ends up lasting 25 years, 30 years, people are happy that it didn't last only 10. If that makes sense. So all the estimates are very conservative, and it's proven track record of stuff that's already been up there.
It sounds like once you put something up there, I guess the initial investment is quite, it's quite a hurdle to overcome. But once you've done that, you've just got this long tail of dividends from Bitcoin, just mining for decades in perhaps perpetually.
Yeah, the largest cost for us is the launch cost. So the launch cost for us is about $300,000 of the $376,000 pilot satellite. So once the pilot satellite's good to go and can prove itself, we can expand from there and then reduce launch costs by launching multiple satellites at once, and it becomes even more profitable at that point.
It sounds so incredible that once those launch costs fall to some threshold, below some threshold, that it just makes sense for all Bitcoin mining to be done in space. I mean, that sounds so absurd saying that out loud, but just logically following a bunch of assumptions that you guys have outlined, operationally, technically, it just sounds quite logical, right? And then before you guys had embarked on this, it just seems like, okay, well, maybe that's just a bit crazy. But from from a technical point of view, from all the benefits, if you can harness those benefits and then you overcome the initial lump sum cost and the technical requirements to get something up into space, it would just seem like everyone should be doing this, right?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I do see benefit of Bitcoin mining on Earth to level out fluctuations of electrical grids and monetizing stranded sources of energy there as well. But doing this in space, you can scale this way, way bigger than you can on Earth. So what you said is true.
I just wonder whether Earthbound Bitcoin mining can even compete economically if there's enough hash rate in space.
That's true, especially once launch costs come down. And
I'm just thinking about the initial payoff time. I know I've done feasibility studies in more business cases than I care to remember. But, once you cross over that line of, paying back your initial investment, it just feels like this is something that can go on forever. Your marginal cost is not much at all. It doesn't sound like there's much of a ongoing marginal cost of production for Bitcoin mining.
NASA's predicting it goes down about 5.5% a year for launch costs, and same with the building costs as well. And we've been basing it off of that estimate from NASA.
So is that NASA's costs, or is that including what SpaceX is doing as well?
That's just what that's the prediction that they put out, and it's been following that since I want to don't quote me on the year, but I want to say they put that estimate, like, I've been following it since like the 80s, and it's been pretty standard towards about 5.5%. And for us to put into kind of perspective of how it would affect us, from launching in 2026, we would be slightly profitable. Launching in 2030, we become extremely profitable per satellite.
So what's the scale of your progression from next year to 2030?
I'll let Nick take this one, because it's more of depending on what route we want to go with, of doing it ourselves or finding someone to buy the patent off of us, etc. But Nick can go into that.
Yeah, so no, that's a great question to ask. So the Excel chart that I have, if you look at what Citigroup has been projecting for launch costs coming down, like today, it's anywhere, between $1,500 to $3,000 per kilogram to launch payload in orbit. So if you look at where we have a really important crux here is around 2030, 2031. And this also matches with a guy on Twitter. His handles like APSK32. Anyways,
I know who you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah,
yep,
you know
right.
him.
Yeah.
So he models the cost projection for Bitcoin over time, and then if you look at Citigroup's launch cost projection over time, you have this nice crux around 2030 to 2031 where mining in a pool becomes, like Dr. Myers was saying, very profitable, with payload to launch into orbit, the cost per kilogram being around $493 per kilogram, with Bitcoin's price being at $500,000. So once that happens, you have a return on investment that's a little less than a year. So if you're putting Bitcoin mining rigs into orbit for decades, I mean, after literally a little less than a year, this becomes profitable, and onwards into the future, you are just printing money after that.
It does sound extraordinary. So, okay, you've got the idea, you got the money together, you hire some co-founders, right? I want to get into that as well, actually. How do you find your co-founders? Because a lot of people watching this, the quintessential ideas guy says, yeah, I just need someone to help me build it, sort of thing, right? It's such a cliche in the startup world, right? It's a moronic thing to say. It's such a cliche, but it's a situation a lot of people find themselves in. And I'm not reducing you to the ideas guy, Nick, but the relationship that someone who has the vision with a strong CTO to help bring that to fruition. How do you go about actually discovering and choosing your founding technical partners?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for months, I mean, you have to remember that this whole endeavor started late December last year. And so for the first 5-6 months of this year, I'd been interviewing co-founders, and it's interesting. You can find people in the aerospace sector that really know their stuff, but just don't quite understand Bitcoin or see the value in putting Bitcoin miners into orbit. So it just really took a lot of time and interviewing co-founders, finding the right people that want to put their time, focus, and energy into this and have the time to do it. So through mutual connections, I actually met Brad, who actually onboarded Dr. Myers. And once we all met up, over, multiple conference calls and also meeting up in person, we all saw the vision and all started really crunching the numbers and, looking over the patented technology that I have pending right now, and understood that we have a solid blueprint for making some major history here.
How did Mike and Brad get orange pilled? Were you already orange pilled, and what were your journeys into Bitcoin? Because we haven't really touched on that yet because of technical difficulties earlier.
Yeah, I could take that for my at least aspect, and then Brad can talk about his after. So I was very skeptical when they brought me the idea. I looked at the numbers and I said, I'm not so sure. I need to crunch these numbers. It looks like a great idea as long as the numbers line up, is what I think was what I told Nick originally. And so I sat there, I looked at everything. I ran some scenarios, I ran some simulations, and I was still a little hesitant at first if we were launching like right away, because I was like, we'd be only slightly profitable depending on when we start this aspect of it. And then as I'm crunching more numbers and thinking about ways to, instead of putting up our own satellite, maybe we could modify, like say Elon Musk Starlink or Blue Origin from Amazon or something, putting stuff onto their buses, which increased the profitability exponentially. We went from barely being profitable for our pilot satellites, estimated to be about 500,000 to, what was it? I have the exact number right here.
Sorry, all our notes are laid out on the table.
Yep. So our pilot satellite is estimated to be profitable to about $500,000 to $31.93 million, depending on the very conservative to optimistic estimates. And so basically off the pilot satellite, I was like, well, how can we make this even more? How can we make more money off of this? And so I started thinking of who's launching up lots of satellites. And if we can get those people on board, it'd be exponentially more profitable. If we got just one customer, Elon Musk, on board with even half of his planned satellites, he would make $60 billion off of the idea. And so, I mean, it's just like you were saying, the idea, once you start thinking about it, it just makes sense. Once you start crunching the numbers, once you get past that first launch cost, it makes sense. And to modify a Starlink satellite, we priced it at about $10,000 to $15,000 out of pocket that they would have to change. So that also reduces their costs significantly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, after crunching all the numbers, I was like, it just makes sense. I'm on board.
And they've got thousands of satellites, maybe tens of thousands. Is that right?
Yeah. So I have their exact amount that they have planned. So the mega constellation of Starlink is planned for 42,000 satellites total. So even with 10,000, it would make them 60 billion. And then Kuiper is another mega constellation that's planned. They have 3.2 thousand satellites planned. OneWeb is 6.3. Yeah, there's just a bunch of different satellites. Blue Origin as well as putting up satellites. So if we can get even some of these customers and show them exactly how they can make money and how it's profitable for them, it exponentially goes off the charts. If we try and do it ourselves, yes, it will be profitable, but only in the millions. If we can get them on board, it's in the billions.
I think if you get Elon Musk's SpaceX on board, they're not going to be a customer.
That's where the patent comes in. Once we have the patent idea, they can't touch it.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm thinking they're just going to make you an offer too good to refuse.
Yeah, that's very true. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's a good outcome too, right? As long as you get to fulfill your mission, and what better platform to be able to do that than 10,000 satellites through Starlink and whatever else they're going to put up there as well. But is NASA an option for you, or is that just too high cost?
NASA really wouldn't be an option because most of the stuff they do is experimental or DoD based, and it wouldn't make sense in the long run. They're not putting enough stuff. Even if they did have interest, the only thing that I could think of that would be profitable is when they start bringing down, which Nick can talk a little bit more about this because it was actually his idea, but when they actually bring down the space station, using that and putting Bitcoin miners on that would be very profitable as well.
So what happens to the space station when that is brought down? Who owns that? And is it scrap up for the taking? Or like what happens to it? How do you repurpose that?
Yeah, usually when they deorbit old satellites, they go into what's called like either a graveyard orbit,
Yes.
or they get deorbited over a point called Point Nemo in the South Pacific Ocean. And underneath Point Nemo is just a whole heap of dead satellites that just aren't good anymore. So they just fall down into the ocean.
Am I being naive, or is there a possibility of salvaging that and repurposing it?
Oh, absolutely. As long as we do it before they start deorbiting it and we get the idea across to them, that would be worth money. But once they deorbit it, it's done.
As long as it's in orbit, we can still salvage it.
Yeah.
Once it's deorbited, can't do nothing.
So how big is it, and what use and what purpose is it? Like, what could you do with that, for example?
If you look at the International Space Station being deorbited in the early 2030s, like 2030 to 2032 timeframe. So you also have like Russia backing out of its commitment in 2028, which creates a vacancy. So you can at least prove the Bitcoin mining in the International Space Station at that point in time. And then once, the time comes and a couple of years from then, when they plan on deorbiting it and destroying it, you can make this a full scale Bitcoin mining operation. Because if you look at who the biggest space-based solar power producer and consumer is, it is them. And the biggest cost in this is the launch cost. So if it's already up in orbit, getting the payload of the miners into orbit and having the competent astronauts that the International Space Station has to hook this up to their heavy electrical substations. And also they have the cooling with the thermal radiators as well. And also they have low latency internet connection through Starlink. It makes way too much sense.
So for the people who are listening to this, like when we talk about space, it often sounds like quite a fantastic pursuit, and it's something that happens, far off in the future. This is actually, it's happening, right? Like it's literally happening next year.
Not next year, like the deorbiting of the ISS.
No. Your Bitcoin mining, like in space, like it's the feasibility of it is pretty much done. The technical aspect of it, like when are you guys ready to launch? I get the feeling like it's not this year, but it's perhaps next year.
Optimistically speaking, yes. There's a lot of variables in it with funding, and also you have to book a launch with SpaceX, which you can actually do online and put a deposit down on with a credit card. So yeah, and I think the wait time for that is a year, no longer than 2 years. But based on what they have launching, depending on the importance of, so basically you're put into a queue, and if something more important comes up, then you get bumped back. So, if we were to put a deposit down today, it would be probably a year to a year and a half where we'd be on the schedule and ready to launch. But that could potentially get pushed back month by month until you get to fill in a proper slot. So I would say the soonest would be a year and a half, no longer than 2 years.
Who would that be with? Who would launch your satellite? Or are you still looking out for that?
So SpaceX would, and with their Starship rocket, it can put the most payload into orbit, so you have more slots. So so SpaceX is the main launch provider.
I want to bring it down to a level at which I can relate to. So like if I'm sending something from one country to another, I need a certain level of insurance in case something goes wrong. Like, and this is quite a big undertaking for a company that's still at a startup stage, right? So like, how do you mitigate the risk of something going wrong in a launch? Do you have some types of insurance that covers space launches? Because my mind is just going to that, and it's like, okay, if something doesn't quite go right and you lose an entire satellite, there goes $500,000 or whatever it is, like, and that could be a big blow to a startup company, right? Like, how do you mitigate those risks?
I think with the proven track record that they have of putting satellites into orbit successfully, you are taking a leap of faith, but maybe Mike and Brad can touch on that a little more.
You can definitely get insurance on the on things that you're launching into space. So yes, there is a risk. You can take insurance on it. I don't know if we would. We haven't crunched those specific numbers if we would have to take insurance or not, because if we were just doing the one pilot satellite, probably not worth it to do insurance. If we were launching multiple satellites at once, it would definitely be profitable, or not profitable, but in our best interest to take insurance on it.
And it wouldn't break the bank either.
Yeah.
And so we see a lot of companies who are now getting into the Bitcoin treasury space, and especially some Bitcoin miners as well. Now, it remains to be seen whether or not they hodl through this bear market, because they couldn't do that in the last bear market, that's for sure. Like, what's your sort of Bitcoin strategy into the future once these sort of Bitcoins get mined, you pay off your bills, and how do you manage that? Like, do you have a product roadmap that's incredibly capital intensive, or is it going to reach a stage fairly soon where you'll be throwing off, not cash as most companies do, but Bitcoin, and then that'll be sitting in some kind of treasury for you?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I've seen that, become a large trend, and especially in the last couple of years. And, with Bitcoin being pristine collateral that seems to only go up in value, initially it will be in our best interest to sell the Bitcoin mined for the profit to continue growing this operation. But as it grows bigger and bigger, like you look at companies like Riot and Marathon and Clean Spark, all those guys, actually taking loans out against their Bitcoin to continue funding their operations. It would take, scaling this out into, if you look at like hundreds of megawatts at least into, over a gigawatt of energy being used to power all these miners, it makes more sense to do a Bitcoin treasury strategy then, because you're not running such a thin margin. So once we get past the point of not running such a thin margin, then actually holding on to the Bitcoin that we mine and being more strategic with that makes sense. But in the beginning stages, for the first few years, I would comfortably say we would sell that Bitcoin for profit to continue expanding out the incentivization of growing the off-Earth energy grids through space-based solar power.
So you've got a technical challenge in launching the pilot, and then what are your bottlenecks after that from a commercial, capital, and technical point of view to reaching scale? What are the hurdles for you?
There's a lot to unpack there. Is there any low-hanging fruit that comes to mind for you guys?
All right. So theoretically, when you're launching these satellites in orbit, you launch them into a certain type of orbit. And what we have calculated is what we would do is we would use a Ka band frequency, which is the highest amount of data. And that's what Bitcoin is, right? It's data, and you're collecting the data, storing it off in your server. Now, the question is, where do you set this up? Through Ka band, you want to set it up in a dry location. It doesn't really rain too much. There's no shortage of cheap, dry land out there, across the country, around the world, really. And you set up what we call a very small aperture terminal, like a VSAT. And this is all just cost effective. This is the low and cheapest way to do it. That still gives you the most profit at the end of the day. And you're just set up to permanently stare at the satellite and collect all the data while it's mining. So for theoretically, like up to 23 and a half hours a day, you can just have one satellite up there mining and just collecting all that data as long as you want. So the idea is to have a ground station, maybe somebody working there, or even set up, like you mentioned, the app. Yeah. To warn you if something's going on. You don't even have to have a person working at all times. It's just collecting the data on its own, naturally.
Yeah, the biggest startup costs are setting up the ground equipment, the antennas, which is, by the way, I don't think we talked about it. And that initial $376,000 pilot satellite, that's all in the calculations as well.
Yeah.
So we went as cheap as possible with satellites and the type of frequency that we're using. The orbit that we picked is the HEO orbit, which is a highly elliptical orbit. And based off of that type of orbit, you always have one side of the satellite in the shade, the cold side. So we can use that to siphon off heat from the Bitcoin miner and just shunt it into space. After we get that first pilot satellite, we have enough funding for 62 total satellites. So once it's feasible that first one works and can be profitable, we can start putting up multiple ones after that.
Then you just have a whole constellation of satellites reading back to your ground station. All the signals are encrypted, so only you're able to get any of the data away from it. So effectively, all these satellites are just working for you. Nobody can intercept it. And if you're in a highly elliptical orbit, you got a maximum stare rate. So you're getting as much data from the satellite as possible versus if you're in a LEO or low Earth orbit. where those satellites won't be able to work as well for you. So if you're throwing up a constellation into a HEO orbit, kind of like the quasi-zenith, yeah, is that the name of the car? So there's different types of PNT satellites already in orbit. Japan uses something called quasi-zenith.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? And it's one of those HEO orbits where it has a 23.5-hour stare rate to give a maximum data, and that's how they navigate around their country, like how we use GPS.
Yep. And then for scalability, once that specific orbit that we pick, if it gets too congested, we can always start using crosslink. So one satellite talking to another satellite, so we always have communication down to the ground.
So the satellites can communicate, transfer the data, send it back down.
Yeah.
It sounds like
That's why it'd be a better idea to connect with like Blue Origin or Starlink. All those satellites would just be talking to each other nonstop, constantly transmitting whatever this data is, which in our case will be the Bitcoin.
So have I got it right that from a satellite point of view, you're essentially repurposing known and existing technologies for your own mission? Do you need to invent anything new that you don't have yet? Or is it just commercializing from a Bitcoin miner's perspective, everything that's in existence already?
It's just commercializing everything that's already in existence. So there's really no theory that we have to think about besides the whole tracking how much Bitcoin is worth, etc., and launch costs. But after you get that out of the way, it's already there. It's been done. It's just another computer that we're putting up, basically.
I'm so excited for you guys because what an incredibly novel way of mining Bitcoin. No one's really thought about it, and Nick, you were inspired by all the prompts that you saw on a timeline and in your life all around you, and you're putting it together. It's an incredibly exciting thing. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we round off the conversation? Because I've tried to cover all the commercial, technical, and like the dream aspect of it as well. But I'm mindful of perhaps I'm missing out on something here. What's going on?
Oh man! So I guess a few. One really important thing I do want to touch on, which really shows how innovative of an idea this is that if you look at like NASA and the European Space Agencies and other space agencies around the world, since 1974, they've been trying to look into how to make orbital solar farms and specific space-based solar power economically viable and profitable. So they've been looking at a technique called energy transfer, which is essentially taking the sun's energy in orbit and then laser beaming or microwaving that energy get to ground stations on Earth. But they've only proven that you can do that with like 9% efficiency. So you have like, basically if you take 10 megawatts of energy, you're only going to get 1 megawatt of energy to Earth, and it's extremely unsafe. So it makes more sense to put compute into space, like Bitcoin miners. So you can take Bitcoin miners, put them into space, monetize every watt of stranded solar energy into Bitcoin, and send that Bitcoin back to nodes and ground stations on Earth with 100% efficiency, and it's 100% safe. So this actually solves the 50-year-old riddle of making space-based solar power economically viable and profitable and feasible. So really, when I look at what Satoshi invented with Bitcoin and what the Bitcoin mining industry is a byproduct of that, I give the credit to the inventor of Bitcoin that they really solved this major issue. And it just took somebody, I guess, like myself, to put those pieces together over time and really start making headway into making this a reality to really prove the really clever side of Bitcoin.
Have you guys seen that clip of Jordan Peterson getting orange pilled and slowly realizing how Bitcoin mining unlocks stranded energy on Earth? And he's just starting to realize, oh, you've got this energy in the middle of nowhere that's absolutely useless until you start mining Bitcoin with it and then use, some kind of data transfer method, whether it's satellite or, if you can hook up to some mobile network. And then suddenly it becomes money, it becomes useful. These remote communities that often don't have any means of earning a living, suddenly they've got really valuable assets that stream, the waterfall, whatever, in the middle of nowhere, or perhaps gas that's being fled from a mine. All these sorts of locations that have stranded energy suddenly become economically viable hotspots. And it's remarkable that you guys are on the cusp of doing that too for solar energy in space. I wish you all the best. It's certainly an exciting endeavor and not without risk, but I think you guys can pull it off. You certainly sound like you're filled with confidence, and you've convinced me.
I'm really happy to hear that, Archie. And I'm just really optimistic for the future and really excited. And like what you said, with being able to convert stranded energy into value, with Bitcoin being location agnostic and flexible load capacity, it's the only known technology that can do it. So it's pretty special what Satoshi created.
Nick, Mike, Brad, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.